Hello everyone, welcome to Highways and Hilltops with Charlie and Jodi. Today we'll be covering Episode 8, Olympic National Park, Day 1.
Yeah, we're so glad that you're back for Episode 8, and if you've been following along, this is the recap of our 2024 summer road trip, where we have gone from Oklahoma to Glacier National Park, and now we've made our way all the way over to the Pacific Northwest to Olympic National Park. So we're really excited to share Day 1 in Olympic with you. This park is amazing.
Yeah, this is a really beautiful park. I'm really looking forward to this one because it brings back lots of great memories.
Yeah, it's going to be so much fun. Before we get started, I wanted to do a few reminders, and I wanted to put this at the beginning. In case you want to go back and listen to it again, it'll be easy to find. So be sure and follow us on social media. On Facebook, we are Highways and Hilltops. On Instagram, we are Jodi Charlie Keith. That's all one word. And don't forget to visit our website, www.highwaysandhilltops.com, where you can find photo galleries, video vaults, show notes. All the links that we talk about in the shows are out there for you. Also, you can reach out to us. You can direct message us on social media, or our email is Jodi, that's Jodi, at highwaysandhilltops.com.
So right off the bat, a little park history, fun facts. Olympic National Park is 922,000 acres. It has 11 official park entrances, 3 located off of the Washington Highway 101, and this will be the focus of our trip. It was established as a Mount Olympus National Monument in 1909, officially designated as a national park in 1938.
Yeah, so this isn't a tiny park.
Not at all. This is one that really compares right in there with Glacier that we just came from, and maybe even Yellowstone a bit. So definitely a very large park.
Yeah, for the size of the park, we really only saw a really small portion of it. So remember, this was our second national park on this road trip, and we were kind of cut down to having to focus on a specific area. Really, by the time we traveled, we had 2 full days in the park to go see the things that we wanted to see.
Now, this one you have to plan for a little bit. It's not like Glacier where there's one road right down the middle of it. This is one of those parks that has lots of roads and things like that. So not hard to get around, but you just kind of have to know where you're going and plan your trips accordingly.
Yeah, for sure. You might recall, if you listened to episode 7, that I told you this is where I learned that not all national parks have that road that runs right down the center of the park. And I had already made our reservations at the Olympic Peninsula KOA before I started looking up where the park entrances were located. So I kind of had one of those moments when I realized that we were actually going to have to drive a little ways to get to some of these park entrances. And for one side of the park, we just weren't going to get back over there. There wasn't going to be time to stop on the way in, and we were never going to make it back over to that side. So that was kind of a hiccup on my planning, but this park is so big and there's so much to see. I mean, you might have to spend a week or 2 there to really probably see it all.
Yeah, it feels like you get up every day and you go to someplace new. Where, again, Glacier is right down the middle. It's kind of contained. I mean, Glacier's a big park too, but this one feels like every day you're going to someplace different.
Yes.
And so you'll travel to another park area, another entrance, and travel to another entrance. It's like you're seeing something new all the time.
Yeah, for sure that was the case. All right, so if you're planning on visiting Olympic National Park for the 2025 season, there are a few things that you need to know. So I want to go over those real quick before we jump into what our Day 1 in Olympic National Park look like. At Olympic National Park, you do have to have a park pass to enter the park. So if you listen back in episode 3, remember I broke down park passes, timed entry reservations, all of the things for you about Glacier. So the good news about Olympic is there are no timed entry vehicle reservations required. You do still have to have the park pass. So I have a little bit of park pass information for you to pass along real quick. If you are in a private vehicle, you can do the standard pass. Now this will let you in a private vehicle with up to 4 people. And that's going to be a $30 fee, and it covers 7 days. So if you're going to be in the area for a week, this might be a good pass to think about if you're not going to visit any other national parks. Also, that same pass is available for motorcycles for $25, and if you're entering on a bicycle or on foot for $15. There is a different designation for commercial vehicles. So if you're going to be driving a commercial vehicle with a group of more than 4 people, you need to go out and look at the pricing structure on that, and I'll drop a link in the show notes for you. Also, you can get in with the America the Beautiful Pass. We also talked about this one pretty extensively back in episode 3, and we've mentioned it a couple of other times on other episodes. This year, the America the Beautiful Pass is $80. This pass will get you into all of the national parks in the United States and any land that's managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Forestry Service, the Bureau of Land Management, the Bureau of Reclamation, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So the America the Beautiful Pass really is kind of worth it. I mean, we have Corps of Engineer property right here in Oklahoma, and if we have our America the Beautiful Pass, we don't even have to pay an entrance fee to get into those parks, like Keystone Lake. So keep that in mind. Also, remember, if you're a special population, you can get that America the Beautiful Pass at a discounted rate or even for free, and that applies to military, if you are permanently disabled, if you're a senior citizen, or if you have a kid in the 4th grade. So I'll drop a link in the show notes for that information about the park passes, and you'll want to be sure and go check that out if you fall into one of those special populations.
Yeah, for us, we typically go from one to the other, so we get a chance to go to a couple, and then you mentioned some of the core properties, and I fish, so it always makes sense to get the American Beautiful Pass for us. But if you don't want to spend that money, again, you can save some money.
Yep, you can. For tribal members, you do not get in for free at Olympic National Park with your tribal ID. At least I couldn't find that anywhere. And when you go look it up, if you can get into Olympic National Park for free with your tribal ID, it pretty much says not necessarily. So
they're hit or miss. So sometimes you just have to go ahead and pay the $30 and go ahead about your day. But this is definitely one that says on the website it is not.
One pass that you need to know about if you plan to visit Olympic National Park more than once this year is the Olympic National Park Annual Entrance Pass. You can get this one for $55. So if you happen to live in the area, or if you know you're going to be visiting the Pacific Northwest more than once this year, this might be a good pass option for you. This pass is going to be good for 1 year from the date that you purchase it. So that is the good thing about all of the park passes, even the America the Beautiful Pass. It does last for an entire calendar year. So if you buy it on July 1st, it's going to last until July 1st the next year. So you could potentially use that for 2 summers if you traveled in July and then traveled in June.
Yeah, and here we are in April, right? So we're kind of to the end of April at the time of this recording, and then there's 2 alerts as of today.
Yeah.
So there's one that Hurricane Ridge is opening pending weather, so it's still a little bit early. It's kind of cool to see that. We mentioned in some other episodes how we like those alerts and we watch these things really closely. And then that Hoh, H-O-H, Rainforest has got a washout closure, which is kind of just, you kind of see as we're building up to the season, some of the things they deal with. But there's a phone number to check road conditions, and it's 360-565-3131. Updated daily. You can check on the road conditions, and so just kind of nice to see. We're in April. We typically go late June. In July is kind of the season, and we're already seeing some of the things they're dealing with up there. It's just kind of neat to watch those things.
Yeah, and I followed the Olympic National Park Facebook page, so I saw when the Hoh Rainforest road washed out, and I actually felt very sad. Because I knew with one way in and one way out to the Hoh Rainforest that was probably going to affect this season's visitors. And that is the case. They had some major flooding there. And at this point, they're waiting for the county to repair that road. And since it is a one way in, one way out, and if you remember right, that river ran right beside the road, and we kind of drove by it all the way to get to the visitor center.
So just a little explanation. When we say Hoh River, there's basically a river named H-O-H. It's called Hoh River. It's also a name of a tribe in the area, a Native American tribe. So I always have trouble with that word, so I just wanted to explain that real quick. It's H-O-H, and it's the name of this tribe and this river, and it's pretty neat in that area. So
yes, for sure. Olympic National Park does not have texting alerts, much to my dismay, because I love the text alerts. I'm getting glacier alerts and Yellowstone alerts basically daily now. And I looked everywhere to see if I could find them for Olympic, but they don't have them. They do, however, have that phone number that Charlie mentioned. And you can go to their website and the alerts pop up on the Olympic page of the National Park Service website. The first thing that you're going to see when you go to any parks page are the big alerts that are happening. So the Hurricane Ridge alert, the Hoh Rainforest washout alert, they're posted right there for you to see. But I will put a link in the show notes for you for the National Park Service Olympic National Park website so that you can jump out there and just look up all of those things. There are actually a few different places of interest on the National Park website that you're going to want to check out if you plan to go to Olympic this summer. So the Plan Your Visit page, I'll put a link to that one. That's where you're going to find your alerts and your park information, including campground availability and ranger-led activities and things like that are going on. Also, there's a page for road conditions, a page for trail conditions, and the online park map. So that one's fun because you can go to specific areas and zoom in, and you can see all the trails around a specific area. You can also see road closures and trail conditions and things like that. So that is a cool link to have. And I think that's going to wrap up all the technical information that we need to cover for Olympic, and we're going to jump into the fun stuff.
So yeah, first stop, the Hoh Rainforest. It's about 2.5 hour drive from the KOA, I guess there where we were at, to the visitor center. Do you remember what the name of this KOA was that we stayed?
The Olympic Peninsula Port Angeles KOA. And let me tell you some sad news. When I got on Google Maps earlier to map out what our drive times were, it says permanently closed.
Maybe they'll do something about it. This is a really neat place. There is one right across the street, so it's okay. There's still a place to stay there close. But this one was really neat. There was an older couple there that ran the place, and they were so nice. They had the game rooms and the pool tables, and it was just decorated so nice. It was just a really neat little place. And we met some really good people there. But anyway, there is one across the street. So we leave there. We go to the rainforest. And man, this is where we really started. This is our first glimpse at Olympic. The drive was just beautiful. A little foggy up here. This is really north, right? What would that be? The northwest corner of the United States. So we're not that far from Canada. I mean, it's just a really unique kind of place. We don't see it yet, but this is the first part of the trip where you have the ocean and the huge forests meeting. Again, something brand new. And it's amazing how when you go to these national parks, you see something new every time. Just different parts of the country just look different, and this one's kind of special.
Yeah, and that fog is not playing around. It is super thick, marine layer style fog. There's a lot of water. There's a lot of big water in this area, a lot of mountains, and then the lower valleys where the fog tends to kind of settle and hang, and you're kind of driving through that.
Yeah, these are forests, all right, and mountains, but this is the first like really ferny, the trees that are so tall and so big, and it's almost like there's a canopy in there, with these trees. So again, a completely different kind of mountains, but it's just gorgeous.
Yeah, and on that drive from Port Angeles over to the Hoh Rainforest, we got to drive alongside Lake Crescent. It is really beautiful. It is just kind of situated there in the mountains. There's tons of wildflowers growing along the side of the road through there, and it just kind of winds through, and there's mountain on one side, lake on the other. It is just beautiful. On our way to the Hoh Rainforest, we also went through Forks, Washington. I'm just going to give you a little teaser right now, because if you're a Twilight fan, then you know that this is Bella's hometown in the book series. And we're not going to get into it right now, but we are coming back to that. So hang on, Twilight fans. We'll be back to talk about a short stop in Forks, Washington here pretty shortly. As you meander on down Highway 101 in Washington, getting down to the Hoh Rainforest, it's really beautiful. It's a good highway, so nothing really scary about it. Like every mountain road, there's some twists and turns and things like that, but this is a well-maintained road, and it's not too difficult to drive.
No high elevations here, none of that kind of stuff. This is just beautiful forest. It kind of reminds you maybe like the Ozarks or like Rocky Mountain National Forest or some of those things. But yeah, really, really pretty, really, really different in the fact that there's a lot of moisture up here in this whole area. So this is one of these places that at any moment you could need your raincoat. Lots of moisture up here, lots of beautiful trees. It's real ferny. It's funny, there's like a heavy canopy on the ground, and then there's like 200 feet of nothing, and then there's this huge heavy canopy on the top.
Yeah, it's wild. So coming from Port Angeles, you're going to make your way down Highway 101, and then you'll turn off onto NF 2999. So that's National Forest 2999 road. That's the road that gets you over to the Hoh Rainforest entrance. It kind of feels like you might not be going in the right direction, and then suddenly there's the entrance station or the guard shack kind of sitting there. But now here's the thing. Remember, I told you that you don't have to have a timed entry vehicle reservation. However, the parking lots are not huge in these areas. So what happens is they stop you at the gate when the parking lot gets full. They stick a little sign out there that says parking lot full. Now, you're going to drive for 15 minutes before you ever get to the guard shack, but you might drive for 5 minutes and then be sitting still and not know why. But that's why. That means the parking lot is full and they're waiting for people to leave, and then they'll wave people through 3 or 4 cars at a time to let you go find a place to park and do your business in the park. And then when a few more people leave, a few more people get to enter. So here's my advice to you. Pack snacks, because you might be sitting there for an hour or 2 waiting to get through the entrance.
Yeah, it could happen. I don't remember us waiting very long. There was a pretty good line. 4 or 5 came out. They let 4 or 5 in. We made through 2 or 3 little rotations like that, and then we're in. But I remember once we got in here and we got down to the parking lot, immediately you were in those big trees. So the first thing that I remember about this whole trip to Olympic is these huge trees. And when I say huge, I mean the base of them are so big. It's like nothing you've ever seen. Right off the bat, we have to get out. We take pictures. There's a picture on the website of me and Weston standing there. I don't know how many people would take to reach around this, a half a dozen or something. I know there's some facts we have later on about the height and those types of things. Maybe we can cover those real quick. But I remember saying if a pine cone fell out of one of these trees, it'd knock you out because it's fallen from several hundred feet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I read that some of these trees are believed to be over 1,000 years old, and that's just crazy.
Yeah, and I think that there's different types of these trees, of course. I remember one example that it said if you took a rope that was 16 yards long, laid it out in a perfect circle, then stood inside of it, you kind of get to see how big around some of these trees are, at least the largest ones. Mm-hmm. One example said that over 240 feet tall. So as soon as we get in the parking lot, we get parked. Me and Weston get out. We're taking pictures of these trees. You can tell right away from just us standing in front of them. These trees are huge. They're probably not as big as the redwoods, but I mean they're definitely impressive.
There's still some type of coastal conifer tree that's just giant. I mean, entire cars can disappear behind these trees. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. One of the pictures has got about a half a Ford truck completely gone. So.
Yeah. Okay, a little bit about the Hoh Rainforest. This rainforest is a temperate rainforest, and it's named for the Hoh River. Again, that's Hoh, H-O-H, if you want to go look it up and Google some things about it. This rainforest was believed to be formed by glaciers, and it is the ancestral home of the Native American Hoh tribe. It was designated as a part of Olympic National Park in 1938, which I believe is also the year that Olympic was named a park, so it's been a part of the park ever since that. Here's a fun fact. The Hoh Rainforest averages about 140 inches of precipitation per year. Y'all, that's about 12 feet. I think I read somewhere that it's between 12 and 17 feet, depending on what the rainy season looks like. That's a lot of water for a year's time.
Yeah, it's definitely catching a lot of water off the coast. Once we got into this entrance and got parked, 2 or 3 hours here, maybe half a day was about right. We walked through the parking lot. We finally got down there on the visitor center, kind of got started on our trails. It was just amazing to me how rugged the landscape was with these big trees growing out of it, all the ferns everywhere. So on the website, there's actually a card, or not a card, but a plaque that we took a picture of the Sitka spruce, and it shows those dimensions like that. It's amazing. There's a few pictures in there as well of trees who have fallen, and we walked by them, and it's amazing to see this down tree on the edge of a trail, and you're walking down it, and it's basically you have to raise your hands to reach to the top of it. So some of these logs that are laying down are taller than I am. There's arch trees in there with all the mosses and things growing on. It's just really, really pretty.
Yeah, so Weston had actually saw on social media someone that had made a reel or taken a video or something of this hall of mosses. So that's kind of where we decided we were going to hike when we got into the Hoh Rainforest. And I'm glad that we did, because honestly, I've never seen anything like this. This is probably the first real rainforest that I've ever been in. So it was cool to see it. It was especially cool because it did have those giant Sitka spruce trees. And there's one picture where 2 of them have fallen over the trail, and they're laying in a cross, like an X shape over the trail. trail and you walk under them. And honestly, it's a little bit eerie because you just think about how big they are and what it must have been like when those fell. I just think what it must have sounded like. I bet it was wild.
Yeah, just crazy big and long. You're talking 200 and something feet long, so big around. It's hard to believe until you just actually see them. And then again, the height of the canopy is another thing that's just kind of really wild when you get in there and you realize how high the tops of these trees are. Makes you feel like you should lay down on your back and look up to see them when they get that tall. Also, all the moss growing. There were photographers everywhere, it seemed like, trying to capture the look of that moss and the colors that was in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were a lot of photographers on this trail, actually, weren't there? Lots of things growing in the Hall of Mosses. It was really awesome. There is another trail that leads from the visitor center. It actually goes down beside the Hoh River, and we didn't walk that trail. We were kind of on a time crunch because there were a few things that we wanted to see down here that day, and we had driven almost 2.5 hours to get here and then waited in line 30 to 45 minutes, I think, before we got through the gate. So we decided to do the Hall of Mosses and then move on to our next stop, which would be Ruby Beach. I think definitely the Hoh Rainforest is somewhere I would go back to, and I would probably walk the river trail, I think, and I would still go to the Hall of Mosses again, though, because it was really, really cool.
Yeah, the Hall of Mosses is a good 3 or 4 hour destination. It's a good thing to start out with and get that hike in. Not a very strenuous hike by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was easy. It is going to be a little bit muddy because you're in a rainforest. So, think about that when you do your shoe selection. Probably a good hiking shoe is a good idea because there's tree trunk roots that grow across the trail and it can be a little bit unsteady in some places, but it's not hard at all. It was actually very nice. The weather was great. It was a little bit misty, rainy on us while we were there, but it was just perfect to kind of keep you cool in that humid environment. And it was everything that you would hope a rainforest would be.
Yeah, cool and wet for sure.
Yeah, cool and wet. There are some other things around the Hoh Rainforest area. There are a couple more trails. There is a campground down there as well. If I had done my homework about Olympic National Park, I probably would have known that. But as you guys know, this was not the park that I was doing all the homework for. And typically those campgrounds fill up pretty quickly. So I'm just one of those people that I don't really check them that well. And I should have because we were in the van. And if you're going to stay in state park or national park campgrounds, the van is a good choice to do that because it's small and typically they always have space for you. There's a visitor center there. And there's also an amphitheater. So I don't know what they do there, but those might be some things that you'll want to check out when the Hoh Rainforest opens back up.
Yeah, some of those ranger-led, they come and speak and show animals and things like that for the kids. So
yeah, so that could be really, really fun to spend some time down in the rainforest. Okay, with that, we're going to scoot on to our next destination, Ruby Beach.
Yeah, this is a great picture. If you want to see what Ruby Beach looks like, we took the picture from elevation. Seems like there was quite a bit of parking in this area. But yeah, this picture says it all. The funny thing about Ruby Beach is you have this national forest and these trees that are, hundreds of feet tall. And then all that backs up to like a really steep cliff. And then from there, it comes down into this beach. And then it seems like all of these beaches or all of these areas all the way back down the coastline have the big rock structures out in the water, the arches, different things like that. But Ruby is definitely, this one you could probably spend at least one day here.
Oh yeah, I definitely think so. It is a little bit of a walk from the parking area down to the beach area because like Charlie mentioned, it's on the side of a cliff. So that height going down, it's not too bad.
Yeah, going down's easier.
But when you start back up, that is something. It kind of winds through there, but it takes, I think I had to stop and take a breather.
It's probably half a mile down this cliff. But once you get down there, of course, you're on the beach and there's just lots of room then.
Yeah, it's beautiful. The beach was busy, but we were able to get a parking spot. It didn't take us long. Also, we had gotten up early so that we could be at the Hoh Rainforest by 9 o'clock or so, trying to beat the traffic so we wouldn't have to wait so long to get in. And we were tired by the time we got here. So we all decided to take a nap in the van in the parking lot before we went down to Ruby Beach. And again, there's a plug for the van. It's nice to have your bed right there with you sometimes when you want to take a nap.
Yeah, and this is another one of those areas that's really tidal. We'd done some research before we left, and they said, hey, watch your tides because, the driftwood and things like that, the water comes up and it gets harder to get where you want to go. Because you can kind of walk, for a long ways down these beaches. Tide comes in, tide goes out. But there's also coves, so it's weird. You can see at one time when the tide is up, it's almost like a cove, and then you see at one time with the tide down, it's like this huge beach.
Yeah, it is kind of weird, especially at Ruby Beach, because you could totally get trapped between the cliff and the water and not have anywhere to go. So you do need to think about the tides. At Ruby Beach, Traveling Scout was able to get out, and if you have been following along on our podcast, that's our little Jack Russell Terror, and he has his own hashtag Traveling Scout. So if you want to see pictures of him on social media, go check that out. He got to get out and walk and potty both here and at the Hoh Rainforest in the parking lot. I can't remember if dogs are allowed at Ruby Beach, but I kind of think they're not. Also, I read something about the barnacles getting stuck to their paws and causing infections. So if you're going to take your dog on the beaches where they are allowed, remember to think about that because you don't want your dog to get a nasty infection from stuff getting stuck in their paws. A cool fact about Ruby Beach is that it's called Ruby Beach because it's famous for its reddish colored sand. And this is caused by a type of garnet. I don't know how to say it, y'all. It's a gem. I say garnet because I'm from Oklahoma, so there we go. But anyway, there is a type of garnet in the rock there, and that's how it got the name Ruby Beach, because garnets are red in color, and sometimes the sand is red. I don't think I knew that whenever we were actually visiting the beach, and I don't really recall seeing much red sand, but that is the mystery behind the name Ruby Beach. As Charlie already mentioned, the sea stacks here are amazing. They even have a forest growing on top of some of them.
Yeah, some of the sea stacks have the same trees as in the forest. It's crazy. Walking down this beach, there's a lot to see, whether it be behind you, back at the National Forest, or in front. You mentioned the sea stacks. Also, the driftwood is crazy. So as you can imagine, you're in places with trees that big. Sometimes your driftwood is going to be that big.
Yeah.
And just massive piles. The driftwood is so big, people were taking up and going, setting up blankets and stuff up there and kind of propping themselves up and having a picnic and just kind of laying out for the day. So if you don't want to lay on the sand, you can lay on the driftwood. It's so big.
Yeah. And also, remember how some of those trees, like the leaves or the green parts of them, how you could see how they were blown by the wind current that comes off the ocean? And they actually grow all on one side of the trunk because of the wind.
Yeah, all the branches are reaching one way in some areas. I would imagine the winters are, of course, really tough there. And, like you mentioned, all that water coming off the ocean, a lot of those things get tore up, especially on the face of those ridge lines and those forests.
We were at Ruby Beach at low tide. And Charlie mentioned the tides a while ago. Now, here's something we didn't really think about. I want to give a shout out to the podcast Dirt in My Shoes, because that's how I learned about these tides and the driftwood. We were looking for Olympic National Park podcasts. We were listening to that on our way from Glacier to Olympic because we were looking for podcasts that talked about Olympic National Park, trying to learn a little bit about what we were getting ourselves into. And to be honest, I never thought about tides until she said something about tides and something about driftwood and something about getting trapped. And I knew I didn't want to be trapped by tides or driftwood and have to stay somewhere overnight for the tide to go back out.
Yeah, their podcast really made the travels a lot more fun, and they did kind of save us here because you could get kind of trapped in there. Actually, what happens is the tide comes up and you're sitting on the driftwood, and guess what? You've got to wait for the tide to go back down before you can walk back across that beach and get out of there. So kudos to them. They had it figured out. And I think that was one of her favorite things, is to kind of lay on the beach there and enjoy the day.
And I think they spent some time with their kids playing in the tide pools and things like that. So those are neat things that if you're just not a person that hangs out at these types of oceans very much, you may not know about that. So I'm going to help you out. I did find a good tide chart that I liked because, by the way, they can be very, 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 very complicated. Or you can find the one that I found on tides.net. They are not sponsoring this podcast, but I'm just telling you, for someone who is not a mariner, this made it easy for me. I went to tides.net, I tapped in the beach, I clicked on Ruby Beach. It shows you a chart of high tide and low tide with the time underneath it. And then if you kind of scroll down a little bit, and I'll put a picture of this also in the photo gallery so you can see one for, I think I screenshotted like Rialto Beach or something. And if you look down at the bottom, there's like a bold L for low, and it gives you the time of day, and a bold H for high, and it gives you the time of day. And those become very, very important, because if you get trapped, it can be like 9 hours before you can get out of somewhere.
Yeah, the good news here is you're just trying to catch it right. You have, I've got 3 or 4 hours. So don't anybody think the water's just going to rise on you like down on the river or something in a flood situation.
Yeah.
You're just planning your day, saying, hey, if we get over here at 9 o'clock, we'll have 4 or 5 hours. Don't have to worry about it. Maybe you want to see it at high tide. Maybe you want to see it at low tide, but it's pretty simple. But I would imagine if you walked a mile down that beach and then turned and went into the national forest and hiked for a few hours, you could get in a bad way. But again, it comes up pretty slowly if you're actually on the beach. But it is good to plan around this so you can have the beach.
Yeah, for sure. Something cool about low tide is, and I wasn't really even sure what a tide pool is. So let me tell you, if you're from the middle of the country like I am, tide pools are these big or small bodies of like pools of water that are left when the tide goes out. So it's sand, right? And so when the waves hit, it can dig like a hole or an indention. And when the tide moves back out, that stays full of water.
It's like a pond that got covered up, and then when the water went back out, it got left.
Yeah, and sometimes whenever the tide goes back out, there can be sea stars or anemones or all kinds of things that are left in those little tide pools. And people will flock out there to go find all of those things and see them in the tide pools.
Yeah, it's kind of like a swimming pool for the kids. Now all of a sudden we have this big pond to play in. It's perfectly clear. It's sand on the bottom. Pretty neat.
Yeah, it is neat. So that's what a tide pool is. So whenever you're thinking about it, and there could be several in a short walking distance too.
And typically, like the tide pools here on Ruby Beach, there's a little stream going out of them. So it's like a valley. You'll see like you can find them like the natural valleys that come between two mountains and stuff like that. So
yeah, that's true. And as the waves come in and go out, even that little creek would get higher and lower, and they would still move a little bit because they were still connected to the bigger water out there.
And once the tide went completely out, we were all using logs to step over the little streams coming out of all the tide pools because, they were still draining a little bit. So
yeah, I have a picture of one of those man-made bridges out there for you.
It's kind of a pretty big creek that's flowing back. I mean,
It is. It was too big to jump across.
Oh, yeah, way too big to jump across.
I think a few people tried, but they landed in it. And we saw a few people slip off the bridge, too. Get their feet wet.
I've seen a lot of people flat on their back.
So those sea stacks, they're one of my favorite things. I really love them.
It was kind of crazy. So every time the tide comes in, it replenishes this thing, and it's like you're on the bottom of the ocean floor again, then the tide goes out. So it was amazing how many mussels and all the life that was everywhere. It wasn't like a typical dry beach.
Yeah, it was really wild. I also took a really close-up picture of some mussels and barnacles that are stuck on the sea stacks and on the rocks, so you'll be able to see what those look like up close if you've ever wondered. So that's really fun. The ocean water was cold here, but there were still some people out there playing in it. I just couldn't do it, y'all. Weston had to get his feet in the water. He couldn't take it, actually, with his shoes on, by the way. But he just had to get his feet wet. I bent down and felt of the water. Did you even get in the water at all?
Nope. It's cold.
It was cold. But there were little families out there just playing at the beach like it was Florida or something, and it was not Florida.
The tide pools, too, they're warmer because they get trapped up there in the sun. But yeah, the ocean itself this is a cold ocean right up here.
It was a cold ocean. All in all, I think the Pacific Northwest beaches are amazing. They're so different than a Florida beach. It's funny because when you start talking about, oh, this has a rainforest and a beach and the mountains, in my mind, all beaches are like Florida beaches, but these are not like Florida beaches.
Just the texture of the sand it's really not even the sand. It's almost like a really fine gravel.
Yeah.
Kind of a rock beach / sand beach, I guess.
It is.
This is way different. Everything up here is colder, wetter.
Yeah, and still very beautiful, just a different kind of beautiful. So after we left Ruby Beach, we were headed to Rialto Beach, but in between was Forks, Washington. Now, here's the thing. If you read the Twilight series, you know in the books, Forks, Washington is the setting for the home of Bella and Edward Cullen, the Cullen vampire family. And guess what? None of the movie was actually shot here. Sorry to burst your bubble. This is the setting for the book, but they shot most of that movie in British Columbia and somewhere else I read, but it was not, in Oregon, but not Washington.
I'm I'm not one of these that know what you're talking about. But I'll say that right up front. But I will say this: from what little I seen of the movie when when the girls were watching it, it does look like it. I could see why people would think this.
Oh yeah, for sure. All of that Washington, Oregon coast area pretty much looks the same. Here's a funny story though. Some people at the KOA, they said that we had to go to Rialto Beach because that's where everyone says that Twilight was filmed.
Yeah.
So I almost was going to come on this podcast and tell you that that's the truth, but then I was like, I should probably do some fact checking instead of going off of hearsay. And I found out that the beach scenes were not shot in Rialto Beach, but were actually shot at Cannon Beach in Oregon. And I do think that we might have some pictures of that when we head down the Oregon coast in the next episode or two.
I will say for the guys that if you get caught stopping here and the girls want to go see this Twilight stuff, right next door, there's a timber museum. And when we pulled up, the guy that was out there, the curator, I guess it's called Forks Timber Museum. He had a actual old steam powered deal that picked up lumber once it was cut. They had the sawmills and you name it. So a really cool museum that's all about timber harvest in the area. So I went that way, the girls went the other way, and we were all happy. So there's something for both here.
He means girl, me, and Bailey was on the phone with me, so that's why. I'm pretty sure Bella's dad's truck, or a replica of it, of the one she drove in the movie, is parked outside the Forks Timber Museum. But we were in a hurry and we needed to get to Rialto Beach so we could see it before we were all getting too hangry and needing to go back to town to eat. So it was a really quick stop. I did take a picture with the Forks sign, "The City of Forks welcomes you," which I think is in the movie because Bailey wanted me to. So I made Scout get out and take a picture of the sign with me. So you can see that. And we stopped at the Evergreen 76 station and I took a picture of it. I couldn't really remember if it was in the movie or not. And now I'm thinking since the movie wasn't actually shot here that it's probably not. But Charlie had to put gas in the van and I went in and there is a ton of Twilight memorabilia in here. If you want magnets, lanyards, keychains, anything Twilight, stickers, anything you can think of, you're going to be able to get it at the Evergreen 76 station. This little town, Forks, Washington, has definitely embraced the fact that they are mentioned in the Twilight series books as Bella and Edward's hometown. So you can have some fun with that if you find yourself up in the Pacific Northwest. All right, so then we were traveling on to Rialto Beach, and this would be our last stop for the day. That's where I got a beautiful picture of the iconic Olympic National Park sign. You have to give it to the National Park Service. They do an awesome job on their signage.
They do. They have something to work with. The Masons have the coolest rock in the world, but they do make it pretty.
Yeah, and the timber, and I just love national park signs. But I love national parks, so maybe that's why. Just near and dear to my heart.
I think this Rialto Beach was the first one where we seen the really big piles of driftwood. And somebody had mentioned this in some other podcast, and I thought, yeah. I mean, I was raised on the Arkansas River. I get it.
Me
But
too.
what I didn't realize was, as we walked this trail out to Rialto Beach, and then when we got to the driftwood, it was like mountain climbing. When we say driftwood piles, we're talking about those same huge logs stacked way higher than your head. I mean, way higher than your head. And that field of the driftwood may be, I don't know, miles long. So I had to crawl up into the top of one of these driftwood trees and just take a picture of me sitting in the stump. And it's kind of funny. This is one, by the way. So keep in mind, I crawled over, I don't know how many getting to this one. I mean, there's piles of imagine this one pile with 100 of those trees, and you kind of get an idea.
And you're sitting on one tree, right? This is like the root system
That's
of a tree.
just one tree, one smaller tree compared to the piles and stuff. So
Weston and I couldn't even find him from the beach. We were like, where did Dad go? And we're looking, and then finally we see him. And this is me zoomed in a long way to be able to get him this close up sitting in this tree. It's funny because when we were on our way from Glacier, and I think it was that Dirt in My Shoes podcast that we were listening to, when she was talking about the tides, you know, and you have to understand the tides, and I could just feel my anxiety rising because I'm like, oh, I don't know anything about the tides. I don't know how to read tide charts. How am I going to figure all this out? And then she mentioned driftwood. In my mind, I'm like, well, my mom picks Arkansas River driftwood all the time. Like, she gave us driftwood to put in our flower bed.
yeah.
And that's the kind of driftwood I'm thinking about. Like a tree from Oklahoma that gets washed into the river, and then at some point it becomes somewhat petrified and they pick it out and call it driftwood. And I'm thinking, what's the big deal about getting caught in the driftwood? Because she said you don't want to be caught on a trail when the tide comes in and then have to climb over the driftwood.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, who cares about climbing over driftwood? It's not that big of a deal. Guys, we didn't know about this driftwood.
So that driftwood's there for a reason, because the water's been that high, right? So if this was at high tide where I'm sitting, it's probably somewhere in front of you right there. So you would actually have to walk down those logs back and forth to get back, you know, that couple of miles or whatever you hike down that beach. So it's pretty neat.
And you got to go see these logs. Like, if we were standing on each other's shoulders, if Charlie were on the ground and Weston and I were both on his shoulders, we still wouldn't reach the top of this log laying on its side. That's how big this root structure is.
Yeah, and this is a small one. I wasn't going to climb any of that. I mean, this is just one I could kind of get up there and rest. But
it is just crazy. You have to go look at it. So here's the deal. These are those big coastal spruce trees, and they become driftwood. So, you know, those cliffs crumble at times. The trees fall down. Wherever they get washed in from, they fall into the ocean. They end up here on these beaches. It's just wild. There's also a picture of Weston, and you can keep in mind that he's right at 6 foot tall, and he's standing at the end of what I would call maybe a smaller piece.
yeah, it's probably, and that's the trunk. That's not the base. So just the trunk or the middle of that tree is, I don't know, 10 foot, probably at least 10 foot thick.
It's insane.
And again, the length is, you can't see the end of it in the picture, so it's, you know, a couple 100 feet long.
Yeah, you got to go check it out. It's pretty crazy. So don't forget, the tide charts aren't hard. You just have to find the right ones. There's a ton of them out there. And heed the warning to make sure that you know when the tide's coming in. So the tide was coming in whenever we got to Rialto Beach. We had spent the afternoon at Ruby Beach, and the tide was already starting to come back in by the time we got to Rialto. So we didn't get to walk down to the famous hole-in-the-wall arch rock formation. I know Weston was really wanting to see that, but I was too worried with the tide coming in. And after I saw the driftwood, I was like, no, we are not walking that far down the beach. But if we go there another time, we'll definitely try to go at low tide so we can go see that rock formation.
Yeah, and Rialto has lots of sea stacks, just like the others, so nothing disappointing there. Still got the gravelly kind of the beaches. There's even some islands again with trees and forest growing on them. Really pretty place.
Yes, it is. It's beautiful. I highly recommend going to Rialto Beach, spending some time playing in the driftwood. It's just beautiful and crazy and wild. And also go check out Traveling Scout's picture with the Rialto Beach sign. I worked really hard to get him and the sign in the same picture. And as his old grumpy self, he was not cooperating with me very well. Okay, so that's going to wrap up our day 1 in Olympic National Park. It was a great day from rainforest to beaches, and I just want to give you a heads up that Scout is in here being crazy, and so if you hear him snorting, that is
he's done with the podcast today.
That is not Charlie or I. That is our snorty little dog romping around in here trying to get somebody to play with him. After Rialto Beach, we were all really hungry, so we headed back to Port Angeles. It's about an hour drive, I think, from Rialto Beach, so we had a little bit of time to figure out what we were going to eat, and I think it was a Weston that decided he was in the mood for sushi. So we ended up at a hibachi restaurant. I can't remember what it's called, but it was downtown in Port Angeles, right by the wharf.
Yeah, the nice thing about this area is there's lots to eat, about anything you want. So you finally came out of the woods and you're back to civilization and you can get about anything you want. The wharf down there is fun to walk around, see the ocean, see the boats, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, whatever you're in the mood for here, right around that Port Angeles wharf, you can get it.
Yeah, the wharf is really cool. There's a few shops in there. There was also a big arcade. Remember the big arcade downstairs? There's some neat artwork. I took a picture of one of them and I'll post it on the website in the photo gallery for you. There's also a view from the pier at the wharf, and you can see the fish shack over there off to the side. And there's some cool statuary down in the downtown area near the wharf. A big statue that honors the railroad workers, and we also ate at a little burger joint called The Rail the next night, and it was really good too. After we ate, we headed back to the Olympic Peninsula Port Angeles KOA. We spent a little time in the game room. Charlie and Weston played some pool. I think that was a fun time. And then me and Traveling Scout went for a soggy walk in the misty rain. You can see some pictures of him with the landscaping. Remember, this KOA, even though it says permanently closed and breaks my heart, won my prize for the best landscaping at a KOA. And then we went to the van and rested up for day 2, which we're going to cover in episode 9 next week. So be sure and come back for that. All right. I think that's going to do it for episode 8 of Highways and Hilltops.
That's it. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, be sure to follow us on the socials, connect with us. We love to hear if you're loving the podcast. So be sure and reach out to us and let us know. Again, you can email me at jodi@highwaysandhilltops.com and tell us what you're exploring these days, because we want to know the places you're going and what you're seeing and what you're loving and what you're learning. We want this to be a big traveling community. So chime in and tell us where you're going and those types of things. Who knows? Maybe we'll have some guests on the podcast sometime soon. All right. I guess we're going to wrap it up.
Thanks for joining. Maybe we'll see you down the road.
And until next time, we hope you get to go explore something fun this week. See you later.